Good afternoon, and welcome to our continuing series, The Ideal of Human Unity, with Kittu Reddy. Namaste, Kittu. Where are we now, Kittu? Where are we at the present?
I think we'll start chapter 14
14.
because chapter 13 we have done, I think, the formation of the nation unit. This is a very general principle, and today the biggest living unit is the nation. At that time, when he wrote the book, they were empires, but they were not psychological units.
They were not psychological units.
No, empires, continental units,
Right.
they are not psychological units,
Right.
even today.
Right.
Now, today there are no empires, but there is an attempt at continental units, like the Organization of African Unity, the European Union, the South American. They are well intentioned, but not yet solid, concrete units which can replace the nation or which can override the nation. Right. So normally these units, they go through three stages. First, a loose unity with no central administration, where there are a lot of similarities and also a lot of differences. And there can be cultural unity, there can be religious unity, but there is no political unity, which makes it very difficult both for defense against an enemy from outside or for aggression if one wants to spread one's areas. So there is inevitably a centralization. And that centralization of power, as Aurobindo says, is an inevitable necessity as long as we try to bring about unity by political, administrative, external methods. And on so far, hardly any unit which is reasonably large, except probably some group of sannyasis, it has always been done by external methods rather than internal methods. See, there was an exhibition the other day on the saints of Varanasi. So I went there. The saints, the pictures are all there, that's all right. But I spent about 45 minutes talking to the gentleman who had put up the exhibition. He had spent 24 years there trying to photograph them, draw them out, etc., etc. And they were very reluctant because they are all tyagis, they have given up the attachments to the world and all that. But then, because he was there for such a long time, he managed to draw them out. So I asked him, are these people really genuine? He said, absolutely. Every one of these people, these photographs that I put there, you can scrutinize their life. They don't believe in life like Aurobindo, right? But they have given up attachment, right? That itself is an achievement. And they are very tight among themselves. I mean, when he came and wanted them to speak, they would sit together and decide, no, we will not speak. It is only after a lot of cajoling, little by little, that they spoke out certain things, right? Except that kind of unity. Every other unit has been done by external means, which means political, administrative, etc., etc. Which means that there is a central organization, there is somebody at the top, and or some group at the top, whatever it is, right? And that has become indispensable till human nature changes, and in order to defend and protect oneself against external threats of any form, aggression, military aggression, economic aggression, we have to have that kind of thing. But then, as Aurobindo says, it's cruel because it takes away the liberty of the individual to a very great extent. But nature follows this method because of the resistance of a human being. Once you get into the habit of this kind of unity, then slowly one can start liberating the individual. Because then, having got habituated to unity, he will not do any action which will break the unity. He might have differences, but it will not break the unity.
I have seen a short clip recently about an African tribe, and a runner won the prize.
Ubuntu.
Yes, and all of them came to get the prize together. So that would be an example.
Yes, but that is in very small. They were only 20 or 25.
Very small, yes.
See, as soon as the size becomes bigger, the problem starts. Because there are so many differences and then there are conflicts. But this Ubuntu, you know what it means, no?
Not really.
You got the idea, no?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard the word and somewhat familiar, but
Yeah, but it is in a very small unit, right? And in a small unit, normally, it is possible, like in a big family, to solve the problems internally, psychologically. But the moment the nation and the unit becomes bigger and bigger, a kind of centralized authority becomes a necessity. Once that habit of unity is created, then the authorities have to feel, is it safe now to give freedom? And that is what is known as the age of democracy. So if you look at the history of all nations, sometimes internally, sometimes externally, lose unity, followed by a strong central unity. In Great Britain, it was the monarchy. Queen Elizabeth killed her own cousin because she was rebelling, Scots, right? It was a cruel action. And from the human point of view, it was brutal. But from the national point of view, Aurobindo justifies it. Because United Kingdom became United Kingdom. And then they were the first also to bring about democracy, which means a fair amount of freedom to the individual where they don't feel the threat that it might break up. So these are the three phases that take place in the formation of a unit, right? The question that he is raising now next is that when we move towards an international unity, is it likely to follow the same pattern? Because nature always repeats and human beings always try to look back and see how we have formed a big unity and now how to form the next big unity. That is because we have no other light and no other knowledge. And then we are not yet psychologically ready. And the bigger it is, the more difficult it is. So here he says that some kind of loose unity has already been formed, even when he wrote this book. And today it is very strong because of the enormous intercommunication and to a great extent even interdependence. Today you cannot say that an event that takes place in some part of the world will not have an impact on us. So everything that is happening everywhere is having an impact on more or less. The United States of America is a little lucky because it is separated by two huge oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific. So it takes a little time But look at the problem of immigration in Europe today. Huge number of immigrants who are either suffering or in a battle zone, coming to Greece and then to Macedonia and then to Italy and then to Germany and then to France and then to England. And now they have got a very major problem on them. Should we allow or should we not allow? Right? And I've got a Swedish friend here, Ulf and Brigitta. I think they left 2 days back. We had a chat one day over a lunch, and I asked them, they said there are whole areas of Sweden where we do not dare to enter.
Yes.
Right? That area is entirely governed by Sharia. You can't enter there. And the Swedish government, very foolishly, now they are regretting, but it's a little too late, or might be too late. They were warm-hearted. Let us allow them to come over. But they didn't realize that once the immigrants come over, they will not adapt themselves to the Swedish culture, but they will rather impose their culture upon Sweden. And since they can't impose on the whole of Sweden, whole pockets. Even in Stockholm, there are areas where you can't enter, right? Because the Sharia is all dominant, right? So this is a very major problem. So now the question comes up, and especially with the threat of ISIS, which is no more a threat only in Saudi Arabia, but almost in every part of the world, and the Muslims are growing at an alarming rate. Their population is growing. Is it possible to create that kind of world state which will control everything? Now there he says it's enormous difficulties. Because how do you solve these problems? India is lucky from that point of view, I think so at least, that although there are 170 million Muslims, and a little more than that, they have more or less got integrated into the mainstream of national life. I don't think that they are a source of serious trouble. Agreed?
Yeah, kind of.
On the whole,
Yeah.
right? But in other countries, it is very difficult, right? And many people say, again, there we have to be very circumspect in our judgment, that the main reason why the Muslims of India are fairly different from the Muslims of other countries is because of Hinduism. Because according to true Hinduism, a good Muslim who follows his laws without imposing it on everybody else is also a Hindu. Right? So that wideness encourages, right, a kind of unity, at least that there is not an aggressive attitude. There are problems, but it is not as serious as it is elsewhere. Right? So now the question that comes up is it possible that just as in the nation we have gone through the second state, a centralization, right? He says it is very, very difficult. It looks almost impossible. What do you think? Anmol?
Yeah, not easy.
It is almost impossible, no? Because that means there has to be a world government. We have created a kind of world organization known as the United Nations. But the United Nations suffers from two defects. One is that it has hardly any authority. And secondly, it is entirely dominated by the powerful nations. Right? They don't take care of the others. That is why India and many other countries have proposed that a Security Council, which is made up of 5, and a veto power to each one of them, should be enlarged to 13 or 15, an odd number, where the veto will be three vetos, then only it is a veto. All of them will have the veto power, but if three countries veto, then the action becomes, final. Now that itself, America is certainly not going to allow at the present moment, unless there is a crisis that develops. So he says that's why he calls this an enormous difficulties, right? And then he brings in the idea of the politician and the statesman. Now this is a very key idea. The politician looks 2 inches ahead of his nose. The statesman will look far ahead, and even if it means that might be there will be an electoral loss or a kind of loss of popularity, he will do what is good for the country, for humanity, and that will last. So the point is that it is very difficult to have this kind of centralization on the international level. And yet, that seems the only way by which we will be able to tackle the problem of international unity. So he is only showing the enormous difficulties. As he says, still it would be vain to hope that the principle of international control will be thoroughly effective. Right? And so far we have not. We have created a World Peace Corps. We have created, the United Nations has created a world army where a few nations have contributed. And there the Indian have contributed in a big way, and very beautifully the Indian women, are playing a very key role there. But that is only in areas where there is a conflict where none of these countries are involved. Now, for example, if the Indian peacekeeping force finds that India is involved in that conflict, it is impossible for them to be neutral. They would certainly support India. And the same thing will happen with every other country. Because as yet, nationalism is a far stronger force than internationalism. It is nice to speak of internationalism, it is there on the lips of all the important people, but when it comes to practical things, right, there is a lot of resistance. There is a resistance in this sense that psychologically we have not yet become world citizens. Am I right or wrong? I can say without hesitation about myself that I would very much like to be a world citizen, but where India is involved, immediately I get, But there I find that Aurobindo is an attempt. I don't know how successful it is, but the very fact that Narendra Modi went and gave his tacit support to the idea of world unity means that he believes in it, and it has inspired many of the Aurobillians. But then when I asked them, they said, that's all right. He has inspired us, Mother has inspired us more, but on the ground there are too many problems. And so they have a problem there. And this, both the President Secretary and the government imported secretary told us, unless we have a hierarchy, Aurobindo cannot solve problems. But when you write no rules, no regulations, no orders, no this, no that, which Mother has put, right? And when these people propose that there should be a hierarchy, Oh my God, immediately two camps, right? So they are trying to say that, look, this is only a temporary phase which we can decide for 3 years, and then again after that for 3 years, if necessary, or if in the meanwhile the sense of unity comes about. But it is a difficult problem. So, on the level of international unity, some kind of centralized authority ought to be there according to the normal human nature.
With power.
With power. You see, the United Nations is there. It has enormous goodwill. It has done some very good work in the field of health, in the field of preservation of monuments, in the field of non-political, non-economical areas where there is hardly any conflict. But the moment it comes to politics, where power is involved, and economics, where money is involved, which ultimately leads to power, the lower elements of human nature come up. That becomes very difficult. So, till this second stage, this first step towards international unity is only a step. Enormous difficulties that come in the way of this.
And this is 100 years ago.
What?
100 years ago he's writing.
100 years ago.
No change.
Between 1918 and 1920, or 1917 and 1920. No, he has a enormous foresight because he looks at the forces that are at play, and therefore he is able to judge very clearly all that can happen. So this is the main idea, and then of course there is one very important paragraph. I'll probably read out that paragraph. He says that if the awakening has to come, the awakening must go much deeper, lay hold upon much purer roots of action before the psychology of nations will be transmuted into something wondrous, rich and strange, which will eliminate war and international collisions from our distressed and stumbling human life. Now the next sentence. National egoism remaining, the means of strife remaining, its causes, opportunities, excuses will never be wanting. You agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as
So the present war came because, that is the First World War, all the leading nations had long been so acting as to make it inevitable. A point to note here is, he doesn't blame Germany. He blames all the nations. In the Second World War, he blames Hitler because Hitler carried that disease to its extreme, and that would have been a danger for the world. But this war was because all the leading nations did that. It came because there was a Balkan imbroglio and a Near Eastern hope, and commercial and colonial rivalries in northern Africa, over which the dominant nations had been battling in peace long before one or more of them grasped at the rifle and the shell. So you see, the Cold War, or a war which was not yet military, but if there is a psychological war that is going on, at some stage it will tend to move into the military plane. Sarajevo and Belgium were mere determining circumstances. See, if you look at history books, they will tell you that in Sarajevo the prince was killed and therefore the First War started. But that is ridiculous. That was only a trigger, right? And I remember, I think there was a magazine called Punch, which was cartoons. So they have put a cartoon, a whole haystack and a long wire, and at the end of the wire, you light the fire. That fire will come slowly, and then it will burst here. And then you say, oh no, because of this haystack. It is not, it is that you lighted it there, right? So exactly the same thing. Saradeva was merely determining circumstances. To get to the root causes, we have to go back as far at least as Agadir and Algeciras in Africa. From Morocco to Tripoli, from Tripoli to Thrace and Macedonia, from Macedonia to Herzegovina, the electric chain ran with that inevitable logic of causes and results, actions and their fruits, which we call karma, creating minor detonations on its way till it found the inflammable point and created that vast explosion which has filled Europe with blood and ruins. Right? So it is slowly. So you have to go back to the root, right? Agadir and Algeciras. And then, of course, national egoism. Possibly the Balkan question may be definitively settled, though that is far from certain. Possibly the definitive expulsion of Germany from Africa may ease the situation by leaving that continent in the possession of 3 or 4 nations who are for present allies. No allies are permanent. But even if Germany were expunged from the map and its resentments and ambitions deleted as a European factor, the root causes of strife would remain. See, we have to get this very clearly. The root causes of strife is national egoism. So, there will be still an Asiatic question of the Near and Far East, which may take on new conditions and appearances and regroup its constituent elements, but must remain so fraught with danger that if it is stupidly settled or does not settle itself, it would be fairly safe to predict the next great human collision with Asia as either its field or origin. Because at that time, the whole of Asia was under Western domination, right? China was not swallowed up, but India and all the other countries were eaten up, right? So they were inevitably, with the rise after the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution of the ideas of liberty and equality, ideas spread very fast. And it began to. And Sri Aurobindo played a huge role in those short 4 years, 1906 to 1910, of both liberty and equality, ultimately moving towards fraternity. He was the only one who spoke in that language. But either it was liberty very much or equality, right? So, even if that difficulty is settled, new causes of strife must necessarily develop where the spirit of national egoism and cupidity seeks for satisfaction. And so long as it lives, satisfaction it must seek, and repletion can never permanently satisfy it. Agreed? A desire is never fulfilled. If you want to get rid of a desire of domination, possession, etc., you have to get it at the root. But if you think that a little bit will satisfy, for some time you will digest it nicely, and then again you want more, and then you want more, and then you want more. So repletion will never satisfy.
So how will it be possible for America or Russia,
Mental or?
America or Russia, to get over national egoism?
That is the root problem, national egoism.
Yes.
So, national pride can be there. but not national egoism.
Okay.
National individuality, which you will respect, is there, but not. See, this is a very individual problem. You can and you should look at yourself, because Mother describes humility as not being, meek, but accepting your value and the qualities that you have got. That means self respect, self honor, and accepting that which you have not got, which you have to develop. But if you say, I am nobody, I am this, and all that, it's all words, right? And I know one person who went and told Mother, everything in me is because of the Divine. Mother said, it's all right. She was not happy at all. She said, look, you have these qualities. For everything that happens in the Divine is there. But you have these limitations. You have to work on them, right? And then offer them to the Divine, because you can't by yourself do it, right? But ultimately, even the Divine needs cooperation, no? I mean, it can't do some magic for you. So this is very important. True humility means to put oneself in the right place, accepting the qualities that you have got, at the same time accepting the limitations that you have got. And when you have totally identified with the Divine, then there is no problem of humility. You are beyond all that. Then virtues are not needed anymore. So then our last sentence is very, very important. The tree must bear its own proper fruit. And nature is always a diligent gardener. So whenever you look at the problems, whether here or anywhere else, get to the root. The root is national egoism. I mean individual egoism, or group egoism, or this or that, right? And that can be replaced by another ego who is a little more powerful, the question that you asked me downstairs,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So, see, that will be a temporary solution, even if that thing happens. But if the ashram has to fulfill its role, and we have clearly propounded to the whole world what we stand for, we have to move into the spiritual life. And we have to admit that we are sometimes egoistic and then work on it immediately. And then step by step, we'll move towards that society. But if we keep justifying our egoism and then use all kinds of asuric methods to get it propounding, I don't see any chance for the future of the goal that we have set in front of us. Forget supramental, decent human beings. See, ultimately, cleverness doesn't take you far. It doesn't mean you have to be an idiot, but certainly cleverness to get things done doesn't help. And this we have to start in our own field of work. At least I have tried it out in one or two places. It has been a little cruel, and I analyzed myself before making that statement. I told the person that your behavior is very egoistic. Nobody likes it, I can assure you. When you tell someone point blank that you are behaving very egoistically, there was a reaction, there was a shock, but because I was much older to them, they did not answer me on my face, but I could see. But by next day, the thinking process had started. I said, you solve this, everything else will fall in place. And do this, do that, these are all external things. Psychology is the most important thing. So the tree must bear its own proper fruit. And nature is always a diligent gardener. It's a very beautiful way of putting it. Is it a practical truth or not?
Yes. Yes.
No, every time we have a problem in our small group, however small it is, not too small, you do some temporary solution so that this can be sorted out. But then go back to the root. And that, if you can work upon, then you are going to get a permanent solution. So this is Aurobindo par excellence. Aurobindo and the mother par excellence.
Good.
So shall we stop today?
Yeah.